Okay, I'm here with Ferrari, who is the vocalist, one of two vocalists in Valatia, and also a vocal coach. A lot of people have been asking about learning how to scream, and I don't really know very much about screaming at all. Never been a good screamer, so I thought we could spend some time talking about it. You were so kind to come on and offer your perspective. You can go through the process of explaining how developing your screaming voice works and what the different kinds of screaming are.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are three types of harsh vocals that you will hear in metal music. There's the false fold scream, the distorted voice, and the fry scream, as my teacher has explained it to me. I take lessons with Mary Zima of Voice Hacks here on YouTube. One thing that was really helpful for me to figure out what it means to do harsh vocals visually is thinking of the vocal folds as like just air passing through them and they're just flapping. And for false fold, it was helped to visualize almost like the lips doing, but then fry is them being pulled together and doing more of like a, which looks silly. That really helped me realize like, oh, it's almost like you're just letting them like vibrate at their own, in their own right. The voice is actually not being used at all. It's just air. One thing that was really surprising when I first learned how to do harsh vocals was just how tiring it was and how much energy it takes, because your whole body is being engaged. And I also had to almost like relearn how to breathe, because I've been singing for about like 15 years. And one of the things that I haven't had to think about for a very long time is how I breathe for singing, just because I have built that habit from like being trained classically in opera.
Yeah.
But now I have to actually think about, engaging my thoracic muscle, which is like around the rib cage here, to make sure I have a proper breath to create the harsh vocals that I need, because it is surprisingly very loud. I think there's a misconception going around right now saying that like, oh, harsh vocals are really quiet. And I think it's like yes and no. They are quiet when you first start out, but then as you build the strength to create the compression of the vocal folds, then they will become loud. And therefore you don't have to work nearly as hard.
Gotcha.
To create these harsh vocals.
So let's maybe go through like each of the types of screams, and you can give like a crude explanation of how you get into doing them. Like, do you want to start with fold? I think that's probably the best place.
Yeah. So false fold scream is going to be the easiest to learn first. So what that's going to sound like is, think of like Arch Enemy and Ginger. These are going to be short bursts of vocal distortion. So what that'll sound like is more of like a like that. Very low, very dark.
Growly almost. I would describe it,
Yeah. And then you have the distorted voice, which you'll hear more in like poppy, which is I think you'll hear me do most often in rehearsal, just because I have the coordination better for this one than for fry. So that one's going to be more like eclipse and white. You hear my voice and a little bit of fry coming in at the same time.
Yeah. Reminds me of throat singing almost a little bit. The tonality of it has like that dual layer.
I think it's the overtones that you're hearing. Yeah. And then you have fry scream, which is exactly what it sounds like. You're basically bringing vocal fry into the forefront, essentially. And you'll hear this most in, I would say, like metalcore, which is a little bit of the subgenre that we play in. This one's a little harder for me to get into, just because this one is, first of all, the hardest to learn, and also just takes a little bit more coordination. So what I do is I sing a really high note, like a C6, and then I just maneuver that into fry. So like, and you shouldn't hear like any of my voice leaking through. If that happens, it's not the end of the world.
Can you describe, I guess, the positioning of your throat and your lungs maybe for each of these three methods, starting with, I guess, fold and going through? How do you see your musculature sort of setting itself up as you do them?
Honestly, I think they're almost identical, I would say. We're going in a little bit more in like source filter theory here, where like we really want to be focusing most of the energy at the source, at the breath. So we really want to think about expanding the rib cage and the abdominals to really get a good breath, and think about pushing all of that air past the larynx and the vocal folds to get that noise of the vocal folds flapping out to create that distortion. So I would almost say that, like, as far as positioning goes, I just make sure to get a really good breath and just kind of like shoot the air out as fast as I can to create all of that distortion.
There's some kind of like warm-ups you can probably use to get better at these techniques, right? Do you want to run through some of the different approaches that you've used to improve your own ability? Yeah,
absolutely. So one thing that was really surprising to me when I first started doing harsh vocals is the importance of needing to dilate your blood vessels before you start doing them, because my teacher once told me a story about how she didn't dilate her blood vessels before a gig and she popped one in her face and she had like a black eye for a little bit, and I was like, whoa. Oh yeah, let's not do that. So basically how you do that is you just take a really deep breath in and hiss out as long as you can. I'm sure there is some point in your training where you don't need to do that anymore, but I think it's one of those rather be safe than sorry type of situations. Let's start with false fold. One of the exercises that I really like to help get into this is almost like imagining you're getting home from a long day and you're going just like that. And one thing that really helps with starting to do these distorted vocals is actually lifting your arms up as you do them, because it really allows your abdominals to expand to really get that full breath that you need to create these harsh vocals.
Gotcha.
Another thing that really helps in making sure that you get the right amount of resonance to really almost make it feel good to do these vocals. Think about putting all of your sound in the mask. So when we talk about the mask, we're talking about like the eyes, the nose, and like the cheekbones. We often talk about this in classical music as like, oh yes, you must sing in the mask because that's where it resonates the best. I say same thing here for harsh vocals. So an exercise that helped with me recognizing this sensation of resonance is one that goes ooh-ah-moo, ooh-ah-me, ooh-ah-ma. Basically, you're doing that all through a false fold distortion pattern. So what that will sound like is ooh-ah-moo, ooh-ah-me, ooh-ah-ma. And really honing in on that M and getting that turbulence here in this mask area really helped me realize like, oh, my voice isn't actually doing a lot of the work. It's the air and then using the resonators in my face to project the sound outwards.
Gotcha.
For like distorted voice, one thing that helped me was just imitating Poppy. And it worked well enough that my teacher was like, yeah, you kind of have the right idea. She really advocates for like using your full body. So we would pretend to like throw a baseball and we would say something like, get out of my way. But then we would just start creating compression. So it'd be like, get out of my way. Then for fry, like I demonstrated earlier, kind of going into like the highest comfortable note in your range, which for me as a mezzo-soprano is like C6, B flat 5, like those pitches, and then trying to get into the fry. But before that, there's even like an easier one you can do, where you can do kind of going into the get out of my way, changing the way to like a low gurgly fry. So like, get out of my way. And like most people know how to do this, particularly at night when we're all really tired. Ideally, when you do get it, you should be able to basically speak in fry or like sing in fry for a decent amount of time. Just thing to remember is that your false folds are going to be your short bursts, and you can only really do like 2 or 3 words at a time. Whereas like fry, you probably do really long phrases, where you get like Chester Bennington doing like a 17-second scream.
Right.
Or like, the lead singer of Fit for a King has really, really good like long screams. Another one that is surprisingly all fry screams is Will Ramos of Lorna Shore. Like when he does all his pig squeals and everything, it's just fry scream that he's distorting even further by changing his mouth shape.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So it's all on the lips for the most part, and kind of like the cheek positioning.
Exactly. So he's like just like contorting his face to create all of those sounds. Yeah.
What you mentioned about fry screaming and kind of like starting at a high note and going down to like slide into it is really interesting to me too, because and I'll make another video at this at some point, like have spent a lot of time in my life trying to work more into my head range when I sing, because I've always loved that squeaky emo kind of sound, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I think in the process of that, I sort of hampered myself in learning screaming, because I was told fry screaming takes place vocally kind of like right in between where your head voice sits and where your like chest voice sits. It's kind of like that break there, and I've spent so long trying to kind of like smooth over that break muscularly that I think like sliding down into it has become a real challenge for me.
I think there's benefits to having a really smooth transition in the what we call the passaggio, and there's also benefits to being able to yodel in between.
Right.
Yeah, because being able to yodel in between, like people use that stylistically. Chapel Rowan, the Cranberries, who else? Alanis Morissette. Like they all use yodels very stylistically in their music. And in fact, I've seen some other vocal coaches who use yodeling to help get into Fry. So yeah, and there's also a lot of benefits to be able to mix effectively. That's how you get really powerful belts. Well known but not well known is that like belting, thinking of longevity in mind, is not actually bringing chest voice all the way up, but is actually using a chest dominant mix. Mix is when we like mix the qualities of head voice and chest voice together to get that, and using the this is getting a little bit into like nerd, like sciencey stuff, but like using formants, changing your mouth shape to make it sound like you're belting, but you're not actually at the source. Yeah. This is my wheelhouse a little bit.
No, I have to stick my tongue way out to hit my higher notes.
Exactly, yeah, kind of using an ah vowel makes it sound like you're belting, but like at the source, you're like, oh, I'm just doing a little mix.
This has been very informative. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me about it. Do you want to talk about your socials? Like, where can people find your own work?
Absolutely. You can find me on TikTok and Instagram at isabella.ferrari47. You can find my studio's Instagram at Ferrari Vocal Studio. And I'm on YouTube somewhere. I'm sure Dylan will find it.
Yeah, I can post the link.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely.